welcome everybody. I'm Sarah Bird, and I lead our responsible AI engineering or product effort here at Microsoft. This is an incredibly exciting space to be in. We have a lot of new work and innovation figuring out how we take our responsible AI principles and we put them into practice. So I'm really excited to share this with you today. And I have with me the wonderful Mehrnoosh Sameki, who is on my team, who is going to show you some of this in action. And so we really appreciate you leaning in on such an important and critical topic as we all learn together how to use AI safely and responsibly. Yay. I like the energy. OK. So first, I want to just start with, like, why are we doing this? You know, there's a lot of conversation about AI, and it's happening fast, and it feels like it's this inevitable thing that just must happen. And, you know, it's not. It's technology. We get to choose. But it is an incredibly powerful tool that can completely change the world. And so we do feel it's important to get the benefits of the technology as soon as possible, because some of these things are just world-changing, and every minute we're living without them feels like a miss. And so I wanted to share a couple of examples to, you know, keep that in mind as far as why are we doing this and what's at stake here.
Microsoft, we're optimistic about the future. Artificial intelligence changes the way we can use data to make new discoveries and improve people's lives. As a data scientist, it has always been my dream to apply technology for the benefit of humanity. I've been fortunate to do this work at Microsoft AI for Good Lab, where for years we have partnered with organizations and leading experts across North America, South America, and Africa. We are using AI to update maps of communities around the world to help ensure they receive the essential resources they need, to understand where people and structures are located so we can better prepare for and respond to natural disasters. We can even use AI to assist doctors in early diagnosis of these diseases to help people live longer, healthier lives. In some cases, AI isn't just a solution, but is the only solution we have. Though we have learned and accomplished so much, there are still so many more opportunities to improve the lives of people around the world. We hope you join us in using AI for good.
So as Satya said this morning, you know, it is not just technology for technology's sake. We see the potential to change the world with this. And so let's talk a little bit about how do we actually do this in practice. So at Microsoft, we put responsible AI into practice using 3 legs of the stool. The first is research, and research tells us what's possible, both what's possible in the exciting good way and also what's possible in the potentially negative consequence way, so that we know what going in, what we need to deal with. The second is policy, and policy is telling us where we want to go, what we want to achieve. So for example, our policy office, the Office of Responsible AI, sets our responsible AI standard for the company. However, none of this actually works without the third pillar, which is engineering, where we figure out how to take those goals and actually make them work in practice, make them work every day. And not only for Microsoft, but also for our customers. And so that's the focus of the talk today, where we talk about how we actually take what we're trying to achieve and embody it in our tools and practices. So the way we do this at Microsoft is there's 2 ways that you may be interacting with us for AI. First, you might be using one of our copilots. And if you're using one of our copilots, we've built a lot of this in for you already. So the things I'm talking about are actually some of what's running under the covers. And if you're building a copilot, then we want to make it incredibly easy for you to do the same thing when you're developing your own AI application. And the way we do this, I guess is the title of the slide here, is that Azure AI is our common foundation. And so we take our responsible AI expertise, what we're finding is actually working, and we build that into Azure AI so that if you're building on top of our AI platform or using one of our systems, you're just getting the benefit of that already. And so that allows us to ensure that the best practices we're finding, the approaches we're using, the expertise that we've developed, all of that gets leveraged by as many people as possible. And it's not just Microsoft that builds on top of this. Many, many organizations today use Azure AI for this reason, because it's trusted. They can build AI systems that they can actually use in practice. And one of my favorite use cases is the New York City Department of Education. I think this is just a fantastic story of what's actually possible. I think famously, New York City, actually where I'm from, was very quick when ChatGPT came out to ban it in all of the schools, right? They're like, this technology, we don't know what it's going to do for education. And they realized really quickly that that was a mistake and that they actually wanted to go the other way. They wanted to embrace it. But they knew that they needed to embrace it in a way that made sense in the classroom. And so they have gone and actually developed their own version of ChatGPT that is designed for education, built on top of Azure AI and our responsible AI tools. And they're seeing really exciting results in pilots in the classroom today. And if you want to learn more about this, actually, they're going to be here talking tomorrow in the breakout session 105. So you can learn more about safeguarding co-pilots with Azure AI content safety and what New York City is doing there. But this is a great example of really figuring out that it's not if we should do it, but it's how to do it, right? And how you do it matters a lot. So let's actually go and talk about how we do it. So our responsible AI approach is iterative. But it's easy to kind of break it down into these couple steps. So first, you got to figure out, what are you trying to do with AI? What is the appropriate use case? But after that, we use a technique called red teaming to actually manually probe for risk. And this helps us identify risk. So for example, with GPT-4, brand new technology, we weren't sure what it could do when it was new and exciting. And so actually some of the first people that got access inside of Microsoft were our red team, who went in to probe it and figure out what was possible with the technology so we could go build the rest of the things. And so red teaming helps us identify these risks. The next step is then we want to actually measure the risk, figure out what we're doing with them. And so we're going to show you some tools for measurement today. Then we're going to go and actually mitigate the risk. And of course, there's a really tight loop between measuring and mitigating until we get to a great state where we like the measurements, we like the mitigations. And then you're not done when the system has actually been deployed. It's out there in the world, people are using it, they find new creative ways to use it. Some of those are really good, some of those are not so good. And so you want to monitor, look for ongoing attacks, look for places where the safety isn't working well, and then respond. And so this is the approach that we follow overall, and we're going to talk about the tools that we have to kind of do each of these steps. Now, let's get a little more concrete on the risks. So we have a larger risk taxonomy than this that we look at, but these are some of the common ones we see in every application and we hear from customers are really important. So the first one is ungrounded outputs. Sometimes people call this hallucinations, but this is where the system is actually adding additional information that's not in the grounding data or changing that information incorrectly. But this also applies to other type of errors. For example, omissions can be equally harmful. So if you're taking a medical summary and you omit a key symptom, that might totally change how you read that summary, right? And so errors of all kinds are really important to look at. The next are jailbreaks and prompt injection attacks. And these are new types of adversarial attacks that the system, that AI kind of makes available. The systems are also able to produce harmful content and harmful code. We also see the model's ability to potentially produce material that might be copyright. And then finally, this is a really new interface. And so we're still figuring out how it should engage with users, what level of human-like behavior is appropriate. Obviously, it speaks human language, which is very human-like, but on the other hand, it's still an AI system. And so what's the boundary of how it represents itself? How does it engage with people? And so these are areas that we look at across the board. Now, to do this, we follow that process for each of these different types of risk of starting with red teaming, measuring, and then mitigating. And I'm going to go and show you how we then mitigate for each of these types of risk. So We use a layered approach that is a defense in depth kind of strategy. So we don't rely on any one element as the mitigation. Like each of these things have strengths and weaknesses. So the first step is the model. And at the model level, there's a couple important things. When you want to choose the right model for your use case, there might be, you might have a very sort of general purpose use case where you want to use a big general purpose model that has a lot of power and a lot of flexibility. But that also opens up a lot of surface area. You might have a use case where your application is much more narrow, and then you might want your model to be more tailored to that specifically. And so there's different choices about the model. The other thing is models have safety built into them now. And so you want to make sure that the safety is actually the right type for your application. Now, at the next level, the models have sort of inherent places where they make mistakes, like prompt injection attacks. And so we put a safety system around that, and I'm going to demo this for you, that both monitors for inputs that you may never want to reach the model, like certain types of attacks, and problematic outputs where maybe the system made a mistake, and so you want to block an output that might be copyright. Around that, you really tailor your application with the system message, which is the program, and it's important to put safety instructions in there, and then grounding, which is bringing the contextual data to actually ensure that your responses are fresh and accurate in context. And then, of course, it's really should be the first box in your plan, but the user experience. How are you co-evolving the AI system with the user? And so each of these steps is important in the process, and let's dive in a little bit more and look at how we do this. So first of all, the application we're going to be looking at today, we love Contoso here at Microsoft. We also love camping. I definitely look like a camper. And so we're going to show you how we can put responsible AI into practice for Contoso Outdoor company that sells outdoor equipment to retail customers. And so I'm going to switch over and start demoing some of this stuff here. I'm going to wake up my computer. That's probably going to help. Okay. Ooh, you all see my second screen. Why? Screen mirroring, maybe? I don't have any. Cool. Screen mirroring? Yeah, let's try this. Yay! Okay, now you can all see the demo. So, you know, one of the new capabilities that we just released that I'm really excited about is groundedness detection. And as I mentioned earlier, groundedness is about the model responding based on the context that it was given, based on the grounding data. And we see cases where even if we provide the right data to the model, it can sometimes accidentally change that or make a mistake. So here in my interface, I have an example. This is the Azure AI Content Safety Studio. I have an example where you can actually see all three of these. So this is my grounding source. So this is a bunch of information about a particular product, which is some hiking footwear. And if I have a prompt that says, ask about the hiking, you know, tell me about the hiking materials, let's pretend that the model responded this way. So it says that this hiking footwear has a leather lining, and the sole is also made of leather. So I'm going to run this, and we're going to hope that it works. OK. And so here's what it says. It's saying, that doesn't seem quite accurate based on the data that you actually gave me. And so it says that actually both of these sentences have ungrounded information in them. And so if we go and look here, what we can see is actually, for example, the sole is made of rubber. So it's not made of a leather-like material. So I'm going to change this to, say, rubber instead. And we're going to rerun. And now the system recognizes that actually the second sentence is fine, and it is grounded in the context. But the first one still has an issue because the lining is not leather. It's in fact something else. And so this system now is available. You can use it offline, or you can also use it for real-time detection to block those types of outputs where your model makes a mistake and potentially rewrite. And if I enable reasoning, it will also tell me in natural language what I just told you about where the system is making a mistake and why it's viewed as ungrounded. So another important type of risk we see are prompt injection attacks. And there's two types of prompt injection attacks. There are what we call direct attacks. These are coming through the user interface, and these are also called jailbreaks. We kind of use the term interchangeably. And then there's what we call indirect prompt injection attacks, and these are ones coming through the grounding data or potentially other sources. And so here I'm going to try, oh, nope. I'm going to copy these attacks from over here because I don't always have them all memorized, and you don't want to watch me type them. So here's, again, the same thing. In my grounding document, I have information about a jacket, but there's also sort of instructions embedded in this trying to attack this. And if I run it, you can see that a jailbreak attack was actually detected in the document. So it knows that there's an issue there. And similarly, I can go over here, and I'm going to take a Dan-style jailbreak. So this is something coming through the user attack. And what I'm going to do is, again, you'll see that it's able to detect that it's coming in the user prompt this time. And so it knows that there's these different type of attacks. Now, these are ones that we see across many applications, but we also find that applications need their own specific type of input. And so a new feature we just released here at Build is called custom categories. And what custom categories lets you do is use AI assistants to help you quickly describe a category. So for example, if I was making a new one, even though we've already built this one for survival advice, I actually just need to add a very quick description. So in this case, I don't want Contoso Outdoors to be providing survival advice like how do you actually, escape from a bear or something, because that would be a risk for me. And so I can actually just upload some examples of what I don't want to happen. I can describe it in natural language. We're going to go and augment this with AI, and if I submit here, it's going to start training a model for me. And that takes a couple hours, so we're not going to do that today, but we have one that's already been trained here. And so if I click on this, I can actually test it. So I said, how do I run from a bear? And here, that I think, well, hopefully this goes, that in fact constitutes survival advice. And so hopefully the system knows to reject it. Yes, in fact it does. It knows that that's a type of survival advice. And we can also go then and do a bulk test. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to get a bulk test here. So now I can run a lot more examples, and the system is going to show me how it's scored so I can see like the precision and recall. In this case, we've only run a few examples. It's done perfectly. About 13% of them are safe, and 87% of them are not safe. And so now I have this classifier, and I can go and deploy it as part of Azure AI Content Safety alongside the other ones that are built in, like groundedness and jailbreak. And so this is great. This interface is kind of show you how it works, but the best part is this is already integrated in Azure OpenAI. So if you're using an Azure OpenAI model like GPT-4 here, then you can actually just see this running in practice. So if I use that same jailbreak here, then you'll see that the system already knows to detect it as a jailbreak. And I can go and configure the settings for myself. So I can create a content filter here. I'm going to select a connection. And now I actually am able to configure all of the different categories. Do I want it to filter at low severity or medium severity? I can turn on prompt shields. I can turn on indirect attacks. That's for input. Then for output, same thing, harmful content. But then what copyright materials I want to block on output. I can enable block lists and other capabilities here. And so together, this gives you control over the content going in and out of your AI application. Now, with that, let's go back to the slides here. And that's the demo we just saw. So a couple other things. I want to announce that, we talk a lot about the OpenAI models, but we have so many different models. And as I said, the right model might vary by application. And so one of the things you want to know is the model safe and secure from the beginning? And so one of the things we excitingly are announcing here at Build is that we've partnered with HiddenLayer to use the HiddenLayer model scanner for the open models that have been curated by Azure AI in the model catalog. So you know that they've already been scanned and that they are appropriate from a security point of view. I showed you the safety system already, groundedness detection, prompt shield. We also have unified content filters. So when you go through all that configuration and find the right settings for your application, you can take that to an OpenAI model. You can take that to the models in the model catalog, wherever you want, so that you can explore with different models backing that. I've also showed you custom category, where you can define a category and iteratively refine it so that it makes sense for your application. And another capability that we did not demo today, but we have new safety system messages built into the AI Studio. So these are messages that we have tested that we find work well in that system message. And you can just go and add those instantly to your system message so that you can evaluate and see if they work for you. So we're really excited about these new capabilities for you. And with that, we're going to talk about, okay, now you've built things safe and secure by design. You want to go and actually test it and evaluate it. And so I'm going to hand it over to Mehrnoosh, who's going to start talking about that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. Hello, everyone. My name is Mehrnoosh Sameki, and I am on this mission to spend the next 15 minutes equip you with the tools that you need in order to assess your generative AI applications before and after production. So let's dive in. Sarah covered red teaming a little bit. It's really, really important for risk identification. She mentioned whenever we get access to any of these models, the very first thing that we do is red teaming them in order to understand what we're working with in terms of risks and what mitigation we really need to put in place. And in order to make it much easier for you to perform your red teaming, Microsoft released this open source toolkit called Pirate, which is a automation framework to empower you security professionals or machine learning engineers to automate the process of red teaming and scale yourself a lot better. And the way that it works is red teaming experts, they come up with a set of initial examples of the risks that they would like to test for, and LLM takes those examples and scales it and makes it a lot more, I would say, variant, so that different aspects of security risks and other risks could be tested. So definitely check it out if you're interested in red teaming. But we know that manual testing and red teaming is not enough. When you want to put an application out there, you really want to make sure you also have some values, some measurements at scale that you can take a look at, build trust, and more informatively take the right mitigation steps in order to really see an improvement in your application. So let's go through that and see what we're working with. The very first thing that I want to talk about is the metrics that we cover within Azure AI Studio, your single place to develop, operationalize, assess, and deploy generative AI applications. Now, we cover a variety of different measurements right now under two big buckets of quality and risk and safety. For the quality, think about it as your application comes up with answer. How do you make sure that they are having a high quality answers? They're relevant to the topic at hand, to the context that was available to the model. They are grounded to the, within the context that was available to the model, and the model is not making up stories or information that were uncovered. How is the fit and flow of the sentences, linguistic capabilities of the language, choice of words, whether it flow naturally and is human-like, etc. How good are the retrieved documents? Did the application really know which document to retrieve in order to provide that answer efficiently? And in case you have ground truth answer, is the ground truth answer similar to the generated response? And so many of these measurements, I would say 95% of them, are AI assisted, meaning we're asking a GPT judge to look at those aspects of your answer and judge these qualities. The second category that we're excited to put out there, and we released that in March, was risk and safety. So these are the category of metrics that really stress test what is top of mind for all of us with generative AI. Things like jailbreak, things like whether it provides hateful and unfair response, sexual violence, self-harm. And last but not least, similar to what Sarah demonstrated with Azure AI Content Safety Custom category, we want to be able to give you that customization so that you can also bring your own metrics or customize the built-in metrics we provide. So let's see all of these in action. Here, I do have an application, Contoso. You have seen it, so I won't spend as much time, but you see that there is a base model that I'm getting access to. Then I'm getting the intent extracted from the question that I received from the user. And then I'm retrieving the documents according to the intent that, or what the user was asking about. And last but not least, we are asking the model to combine the intent and the documents that is retrieved and come up with an answer and provide. Now you can see that it's using this chat.prompty. It's nothing but essentially a prompty file, which is a file that helps you perform your or execute your prompt in a very controlled way. It gives you exactly what is the input, what is the output, and it gives you that you're an AI system, that you're supposed to answer questions about outdoor gears and all of the products that we sell. But this is also for my customer care representative, so it's supposed to answer questions about my customers as well. So I have this application, and here I ran it on just one instance, which is which tent is the most waterproof. And you can see that it provides an answer, both the Alpine Explorer and the Trailmaster. But now I want to make sure that I can evaluate it before putting it out there. So I go to my evaluation file. Here, I want to showcase two things. Both the quality metrics that I talked about on some data set that I have access to, and the second aspect is the custom metrics. And here I am bringing to you two custom metrics: friendliness, which was one of the unsupported metrics, so I'm defining it, which talks about how friendly and approachable and warm that chatbot was. As you can imagine, it's quite important when you're putting that chatbot out there to address your customer's concern. You want it to represent your company in a warm manner. And the other capabilities that I have is completeness or information coverage, which this one is a Python-based. It actually requires ground truth, and it looks into the answer, and it tries to understand whether everything that is in the generated answer, whether all the information that was available in the context related to this question, are we covering all of those information correctly in the answer, or are we having some information loss? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to submit this evaluation. And for the sake of time, I already have one that I have finished, one with the data set that did not have ground truth on it. So you can see that I have relevance, groundedness, coherence, and fluency, both the average of these values and also the breakdown of these values on my test set. And not just the average, which gives me a sense of how good this data set is, or this application is, but also I can take a look at certain instances. And this is really helpful because it helps me improve my application. But maybe there's something about the metric that I can customize better to my scenario. For example, here, the person is asking, what is your return policy? And the model is answering, could you please specify the membership status you hold, non-gold, platinum? Apparently, the return policy depends on that. And the groundedness is 1. Maybe I see that as a signal that, OK, I have to tell groundedness that whenever it's asking for follow-up questions to get clarification, do not score it low. That's actually a very valid answer to ask for clarification questions. So that gives me a lot of indication about my metrics and how to improve them, but also about the application and how I can go about this. You can see friendliness here. I can take a look at that as well. Not just the score, but also I have the explanation of, for example, why this is a friendliness of 4, because it was helpful and friendly and it provided information, et cetera, et cetera. And the other evaluation that I generated right in front of you was the completeness, which also gives me a sense of my information loss. Am I having all the information that was necessary in this answer, yes or no? So you can imagine that this is kind of completing groundedness. Groundedness is, am I making up stuff? And this one is in the answer, am I having everything that I needed to have in order to provide this a good answer to my user? And so, for example, here I can see that the person is asking which camping table holds the most weight, and the model is still struggling, but we know that the ground truth is the adventure dining table and a particular product. So this is a good example where I can go back to traces and try to understand why my application is not retrieving the right documents and is unable to really understand which dining table has the most weight. Now, this is about quality and custom evaluators that we just saw together. Now let's go back to my other application and take a look at our safety measurements. One caveat with safety measurements is a lot of you do not have the right test set in order to test different safety aspects of your generative AI applications. We see that a lot. People have a test set, but it doesn't really have the novel jailbreak attempts. It doesn't really have a lot of attempts to get hateful, unfair, sexual, this type of content from it. So what we are doing here is we're also putting in your hands an adversarial simulator, which is twofold. It first generates attack-like data that then you can pass to your application and then specify things like how many turns, like do you want it to be just single turn or like a conversation, and then how many simulation you want to generate, and then you can also pass your application as a target. And so what it does is it generates adversarial data and then passes that adversarial data to your endpoint and simulates a conversation. And then with evaluation safety, we measure like how your application is, whether and to what extent your application is falling for those type of attempts. So if I show you this particular file, I do have my different evaluators for violence, self-harm, sexual and hate and unfairness. And I want to submit this and try to measure this. So I paused that one, which was still running. And essentially what I can do is I submit the exact same thing that I did, but this time on evaluate safety risk on the adversarial data that I generated. And let's go back and take a look together. One thing before showing you, this exact same generation and simulation is also available from the UI path if you want it. So you can also go to the wizard and choose the risk and safety check and identify the interaction and samples and then have it generate adversarial data for you. Now, I have one that is already finished. One thing that I'm noticing here is there's still some defect rate, meaning there's some percentage of violence, sexual, self-harm, and hateful content that is being generated. I can also take a look at what those instances are and the reasoning behind it. So for example, violence is medium because the system includes a medium graphic depiction of violence. So I can actually build trust with these measurements and understand the justification and reasoning behind it. What I noticed after I generated this was that the prompt shield capability that Sarah introduced was off on my base model that I was using to build an application. And next, I turned that on and regenerated these measurements. And you could see that in the same experiment tracking UI, I can compare the one that had prompt shield on and off and set the off as baseline. And you can see that for the one that had prompt shield on, the defect rates for sexual and violence and self-harm and hate has been reduced, which is great. So that really shows me that these type of filtration have such a good impact on my application, and that can essentially motivate me to always check my settings and use them. Okay, so once going back to the slide, so what I demonstrated to you was essentially a threefold story. When we want to generate evaluations, we want test data. Either you bring that test data to us, or we help you with simulation, both for adversarial attack-like data and also for on-topic general question answers related to the topic of your RAG scenario at hand. The second aspect is metrics. We give you built-in metrics for measuring the quality and safety of your generative AI application, and also we give you customization of them. You can customize them or you can bring your own. And last but not least, we give you a UI where regardless of how you submitted your evaluations from the code first path or UI path, you can take a look, you can dive deeper, and you can do experiment tracking and compare multiple evaluations. And these metrics are actually really meaningful when you're looking at them across different evaluations and kind of like track the direction that you're heading towards. Now you have an application, you look at the measurements, you like it, you put it out there. We all know that applications perform differently when they're out there in the wild compared to the lab setting. That's no different for generative AI applications. People are very creative and they can send you queries that can completely change the way that your generative AI applications operated in your perspective. And so that's why the model monitoring story becomes quite important as well. Now, in March, we introduced our risk and safety monitoring, which looks at the Azure AI content safety filtering that Sarah introduced, but now during production time, both across user input and model input. And it provides important information such as block rate, total block request, that broken down across different categories of, in fact, what was triggered and what was blocked. But if you're on the user side of it, you can also see those users, I call them potentially abusive users, who really trigger your Azure AI content safety setup the most. And you can then decide what you would do with them and what policies you want to put in place. This capability soon will come to Azure AI Studio, but right now in Azure AI Studio, you can get access to a variety of different capabilities for monitoring your generative AI application, like token usage, operational metrics like requests per minute, latency, error rate, but last but not least, the exact same measurements that you saw for quality, for generation quality before production, now you can also see post-production and take a look at them, how they're doing in production, and then take a look at your production data and real-world scenarios and take a look, and then decide when is a good time to incorporate mitigations or what type of mitigations you can put in place. And now I hand it back to you to talk about the governance around this system.
Okay, so you saw a lot of great new capabilities that help you address AI-specific risk, but let's talk about the foundation that you built on. So Azure and Microsoft starts with a secure and private foundation. From the beginning, your data is your data. We do not use it to train the foundation models. We make sure that the models and the data are protected at every step. And for novel risks like copyright generation, we protect you with our customer copyright commitment. And so it's really important that we start with this great foundation that we've already built, and we're building new AI capabilities on top of that. Now, we've taken this foundation and we've extended that to enterprise promises that we provide in AI Studio. We know that these things are important in building real applications, and so we've built in things like managed VNet support and the ability to monitor and have budgeting and auditing so that you have an AI platform that you can control. Now, there's more to the story, though. You need to be able to govern and operate and manage your AI applications just like any other software. And so we have two exciting new announcements at Build in how you stay safe and secure in your applications. The first is Microsoft Purview, which allows you to take your data governance and bring it to your AI application. So all of the labels you have for sensitive data and confidential data and different data types that are important in your applications will now work in Azure AI, so you can bring them into your AI applications and then monitor for the use of those in Purview. We've also extended Microsoft Defender for Cloud so that it natively understands Azure AI resources and integrates with Azure AI content safety. So let me show you how this actually works. So now, when you have sensitive data and labeling with Purview, that flows in, and Azure AI understands what to do with that. And then after your AI application is running, the outputs go into these Microsoft security offerings. So if you see, for example, a jailbreak attempt, Microsoft Defender for Cloud is now natively integrated with Azure AI Content Safety. So that will trigger an alert in Defender that your SecOps team can actually investigate to understand if there's a real ongoing threat there. Similarly, the outputs will go to Purview so you can investigate your data security and compliance. And so this is enabling you to take your existing approaches but now extend them to your AI application, which we're really excited about. So with that, we've shown you a lot of new pieces. I think this is a great start on this journey of enabling you to now have an end-to-end story of how you build applications safely and securely, starting from identifying risks with red teaming and pirate, enabling you then to actually mitigate risk safe by design at every single layer from the model through the user interface, enabling you then to evaluate the risk and then monitor, both AI-specific monitoring built into Azure AI, and then larger data and security monitoring built into Microsoft security tools. So this is enabling you all to start building the same way we build AI applications at Microsoft. And we know that you're going to make an amazing, innovative applications like what we saw at the beginning that are going to change businesses and are going to change the world. And so really excited to see you put all of this into practice. Now, this is just a short version of all of the different pieces we have. So we've got a lot more going on at Build. We have the expert meetup booth where we're happy to answer a lot more of your questions. We also have sessions on data security, more on Azure AI Content Safety, more on evaluating, safeguarding your application. So there's another breakout tomorrow. And so come, and red teaming, which is a very hot and important topic. So come and check out all these sessions if you want to learn a lot more about what we're doing here. And with that, you can follow up on all the resources here through this link. So thank you all very much.